Sofia Novak moved through the ICU like water, present, essential, and utterly unremarkable. Her hands worked with mechanical precision as she adjusted the 4-drip for the patient in bed 7, checked vitals, noted the readings on her tablet. Around her, the fluorescent lights hummed their eternal song, and the ventilators breathed in perfect rhythm. She had learned long ago that efficiency was the best invisibility. Nurse Novak. Adrian Keller's voice cut through the sterile air before she saw him. The hospital administrator approached with his tablet clutched like a shield, his tie slightly loosened from a 14-hour day of budget meetings. "I need you to pick up an extra rotation this weekend." Angela called in sick again. Sofia didn't look up from her work. "Of course, Mr. Keller." He lingered, as if expecting protest. When none came, he frowned. "You know, Sofia, you're incredibly efficient, but you could stand to show a little more personality. Connect with the staff. Smile occasionally." He gestured vaguely at her face. "The patients respond better to warmth." "The patients respond better to competence," Sofia replied, her tone as flat as her expression. "I'll take the weekend shifts." Keller's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he might push back, assert whatever authority he felt she'd undermined. Instead, he simply shook his head and walked away, muttering something about people skills and team players. Sofia returned to her work. Personality was a luxury she couldn't afford. Warmth left fingerprints. Sofia. Dr. Elias Moreau appeared at her elbow without preamble, already moving toward the crash cart. "I need you to prep bed 4 for intubation. Now." She was already moving before he finished speaking, pulling the necessary equipment, anticipating his next 3 requests. Moreau worked with the casual assumption that she would be exactly where he needed her, doing exactly what he needed done. After 2 years of night shifts together, he had never once asked her opinion on a procedure, never inquired about her background or training. To him, she was simply an extension of his own competence, a well-oiled tool that required no maintenance beyond a paycheck. They worked in synchronized silence as the patient in bed 4, a middle-aged man with a face covered in bruises and a chart marked with more security flags than medical notes, struggled to breathe. Sofia handed Moreau the laryngoscope, positioned the patient's head, monitored the oxygen saturation with the same detached focus she brought to everything. "Good," Moreau said when the tube was secure. It might have been the first time he'd spoken directly to her in 3 days. He stripped off his gloves and walked away without another word, already checking his phone for the next crisis. Sofia cleaned up methodically, disposing of the medical waste, resetting the equipment, updating the digital chart. Around her, the ICU continued its nocturnal hum, machines breathing for those who couldn't, hearts beating on borrowed time, and a blonde night nurse who moved through it all like a ghost who had long ago forgotten how to haunt. She checked her watch. 4 more hours until dawn. 4 more hours of being invisible, essential, and utterly unremarkable. 4 more hours of being no one at all. The lights died at 2:47 a.m. Sofia's hand didn't pause on the medication cart. In the sudden darkness, emergency lighting flickered to life, dim red eyes scattered across the ceiling, casting the ICU in crimson shadows. Around her, monitors switched to battery backup with a chorus of soft beeps. Standard protocol for a power outage. Nothing unusual. Except the backup generators hadn't kicked in. Sofia's fingers stilled on the morphine vial. The generators should have engaged within 3 seconds. It had been 8. 9. 10. What the hell? A nurse's voice carried from the station, tight with confusion. Is this a drill? Dr. Moreau emerged from bed 9, already reaching for his phone. The blue glow illuminated his frown. No signal. He turned toward the nurse's station. Someone get security on the landline. The phone line was dead. Sophia knew it before the night shift supervisor picked up the receiver and heard only silence. She knew it the way she knew the exact distance to every exit, the location of every potential weapon, the rhythm of footsteps that didn't belong. And someone was coming. The stairwell door opened with a whisper of hydraulics. No alarm. The badge reader should have logged the entry, should have sent an alert to security. But the power was cut, and the communications were severed, and the footsteps approaching were too measured, too quiet for staff responding to an emergency. Sophia's pulse didn't quicken. That particular autonomic response had been trained out of her in a facility outside Volgograd when she was 19. Instead, her mind shifted into something colder, something that catalogued the approaching threat with clinical detachment. 4 men. Professional spacing. Soft-soled boots. Moving with the practiced silence of operators who had done this before. The first figure rounded the corner into the ICU, black tactical gear, suppressed rifle held at low ready, face obscured by a balaclava. He swept the room with economical precision, the barrel of his weapon tracking across the nurse's station, the patient bays, the frozen staff. 3 more men followed. Same gear. Same weapons. Same predatory calm. The lead operator's gaze settled on the occupied beds, counting, calculating. When he spoke, his accent was thick, Eastern European, and utterly without mercy. Nobody moves. Nobody screams. You follow instructions, maybe you live. Someone whimpered. Sophia thought it might have been Keller, pressed against the wall near the supply closet, his expensive watch catching the emergency lighting. The operator raised his rifle toward the ceiling and fired once. The suppressed shot made a sound like a cough, barely louder than the ventilators. A ceiling tile shattered, raining acoustic foam onto the floor. That was the warning, the man said. His eyes, pale, empty, swept across the staff. Next one goes in someone's head. Now. Everyone. On your knees. Around Sophia, bodies began to drop. Keller. Moreau. The other nurses. Trembling, crying, praying. Sophia remained standing for exactly 2 seconds longer than she should have. Long enough to memorize faces, weapons, tactical positioning. Long enough to count ammunition pouches and identify the team leader by the way the others deferred to his space. Then she folded herself onto the cold linoleum floor, her blonde hair falling forward to hide her eyes. And in the darkness behind that curtain of hair, something very old and very dangerous began to wake up. The man who entered last was different from the others. He moved with the lazy confidence of someone who had never needed to prove his dominance because it preceded him like a shock wave. Taller than his team, broader through the shoulders, he carried his rifle like an afterthought, a tool he might use if the mood struck him, but hardly necessary when fear did the work more efficiently. Bed 4, he said, his voice a rumble that seemed to originate from somewhere deep in his chest. Where is he? No one answered. Around Sophia, the staff had collapsed into various stages of terror. Keller's breath came in short, panicked gasps. A young nurse named Rachel was crying silently, her shoulders shaking. Dr. Moreau had his hands raised, his usual surgical composure shattered into something raw and human. The large man, Volkov, Sophia's memory supplied, matching the voice to intercepted intelligence reports from 3 years ago, walked slowly past the kneeling staff. His boots made deliberate sounds against the linoleum, each step a small explosion in the silence. I will ask once more. He stopped in front of Keller, whose expensive suit was now rumpled, his hair disheveled. The witness. Bed 4. Which one? Keller's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Sweat had appeared on his forehead, catching the red emergency lighting. Volkov sighed, a sound of theatrical disappointment. Then his hand moved with casual brutality, striking Keller across the face with the stock of his rifle. The administrator fell sideways with a cry, blood blooming from his split lip. "Please," Keller gasped, his hands coming up defensively. "Please, I'm just administration, I don't know the patients by." "Then perhaps you are useless to me." Volkov raised the rifle, centering it on Keller's forehead with the same indifference someone might show when selecting produce. "Should I test this theory?" "Bay 7. Dr. Moreau's voice cracked. "Bed 4 is Bay 7, the patient with the thoracic injuries, but he's critical, he can't be moved. I am not here to move him." Volkov's smile was audible even if his face remained hidden. He gestured to two of his operators. "Go. Verify. If the good doctor is lying, kill him first." The operators moved toward Bay 7. Sophia watched through her lowered lashes, her breathing unchanged, her pulse steady. Around her, the others had dissolved into various performances of terror, shaking, weeping, praying to gods who had no jurisdiction in this sterile hell. But Sophia remained utterly still. Not frozen. Not paralyzed. Still in the way a predator becomes still when calculating the precise moment to strike. Her hands rested loosely on her thighs. Her spine held perfect posture despite the kneeling position. Her eyes, hidden behind the fall of blonde hair, tracked every movement with the cold precision of a targeting system acquiring data. Volkov paced back past the line of kneeling staff, his attention on Bay 7 where his men were confirming the target. He passed within 2 feet of Sophia without giving her a second glance. Just another terrified nurse. Just another victim. Just another mistake in a room that was quickly filling with them. In Bay 7, one of the operators raised his weapon. The suppressed shot coughed twice. Then silence. "Good," Volkov said, turning back to the staff. "Now. The rest of you will remain useful, or you will join him." One of Volkov's men had made an error. Sophia recognized it immediately when he stumbled coming through the stairwell door, his hand pressed against his side where crimson was beginning to seep through his tactical vest. A security guard's last act of defiance, perhaps. A lucky shot in the initial breach. The operator hissed something in Russian, a creative combination of profanity and anatomy, and Volkov's attention snapped to him with the irritation of a craftsman interrupted mid-work. "Yuri." Volkov's voice carried disappointment. "Careless." Grazed, the wounded man grunted. "Nothing serious." "Serious enough to bleed on my operation." Volkov turned his gaze across the kneeling staff, his eyes settling on Sophia with the arbitrary selection of a man choosing which ant to crush. "You. Nurse. You have medical supplies?" Sophia raised her head slowly, her expression blank. "Yes." "Then stop kneeling and be useful. Patch him up. And be quick about it, or I will assume you're more valuable as an example than a medic." She rose with careful economy, no wasted motion, no theatrical fear. The other staff members watched her with the desperate hope of drowning passengers seeing someone reach for a life preserver. As if her cooperation might save them. As if compliance was a currency that purchased mercy from men like these. "My supply case," Sophia said, her voice flat. "It's in the staff lounge." Volkov gestured with his rifle. "Then fetch it. Dmitri will accompany you. If you run, if you make any sound, he will kill you and then return to kill one of your colleagues. Do you understand?" "Yes." The operative named Dmitri followed her through the darkened corridor, his rifle trained on her spine. Sophia moved with the same efficient grace she brought to every task, her footsteps measured, her breathing unchanged. They passed the nurse's station, the medication room, the small staff lounge where her supply case waited on the upper shelf of her locker. She retrieved it, a hard-sided case, larger than standard, secured with combination locks that her fingers opened without conscious thought. Dmitri watched from the doorway, his attention divided between her and the corridor behind them. A mistake. His second of the evening. Sophia set the case on the small table and opened it. The top tray held exactly what one would expect: syringes, gauze, antiseptic, suture kits. Standard emergency supplies for an ICU nurse who believed in being prepared. She lifted the top tray with steady hands. Beneath it, secured in custom foam compartments, lay supplies of a different nature. A compact field surgery kit, but arranged with the precision of someone trained to work on bodies that couldn't go to hospitals. Specialized instruments that could extract information as easily as bullets. A small titanium case containing pharmaceutical compounds that were legal in exactly 0 countries. And in the lowest compartment, wrapped in sterile cloth, a disassembled GSH-18 pistol, Russian military issue, a ghost from a life she'd spent 2 years pretending to forget. Sophia's expression didn't change. She selected antiseptic, gauze, and a preloaded syringe of local anesthetic from the visible supplies. Her fingers didn't linger on the hidden compartments. Dmitri saw only a nurse gathering materials, efficient and forgettable. She closed the case and turned back toward the ICU, carrying tools meant for healing and tools meant for killing in the same steady hands. Sophia worked on Yuri's wound with clinical detachment, her hands moving through the familiar choreography of field medicine. The bullet had carved a shallow groove across his oblique, painful, bleeding freely, but ultimately survivable. She cleaned it with antiseptic that made him hiss through his teeth, then closed it with butterfly strips and gauze. "You are very calm," Yuri observed in accented English, watching her face for any tremor of fear. "The others, they cry and shake. But you?" "Nothing." Sophia met his eyes with the flat gaze of someone who had learned long ago that emotion was a luxury. Panic doesn't stop bleeding. Volkov had been listening. He approached with that lazy predator's walk, studying Sophia with renewed interest. A pragmatist. "I appreciate this quality." He tilted his head. "Tell me, nurse, what is your name?" "Sophia." "Sophia." He tested the word, tasting it. "You have steady hands." "Good. Yuri, take her to check the backup generator. If the police arrive before we are finished here, I want to ensure our insurance policy remains in darkness." Insurance policy. Sophia understood immediately. Hostages were more valuable when rescue was complicated by poor visibility and unknown variables. Volkov was ensuring his tactical advantage remained intact. "The generator room requires authorization," Sophia said. "Then I suggest you find a way to authorize yourself." Volkov's smile was audible. "You strike me as resourceful." She was. That was precisely the problem. Yuri followed her through the service corridors, his rifle trained on her back, his wound making him irritable and less attentive than he should have been. Sophia moved with the same measured efficiency, leading him down 2 flights of stairs to the basement level where the hospital's mechanical systems hummed their industrial symphony. The generator room was secured behind a heavy door with a keycard reader. Sophia produced her badge. Keller had given all senior night staff emergency access during the last evacuation drill, and the lock disengaged with a magnetic click. Inside, the backup generator roared its diesel-fueled song, emergency fuel tanks feeding power to the essential systems. The emergency lighting, the ventilators, the monitoring equipment. Everything that kept the hospital functioning in crisis. "Check the fuel levels," Yuri ordered, positioning himself by the door. "Make sure we have hours, not minutes." Sophia approached the generator control panel, her reflection ghosting across the glass display. The system was automated, efficient, designed to run for 72 hours without intervention. But every system had vulnerabilities if you knew where to look. And Sophia had been trained by people who understood that infrastructure was just another weapon waiting to be turned against its operators. Her fingers moved across the emergency shutoff controls with practiced certainty. She disabled the automatic restart sequence first. A subtle adjustment that would look like mechanical failure rather than sabotage. Then she triggered the fuel valve override, starving the engine of diesel in a way that would seem like a pressure regulator fault. The generator coughed. Sputtered. The roar began to fade. "What are you?" Yuri started forward. The generator died with a final mechanical wheeze. Every light in the hospital went dark, a darkness so complete it swallowed sound itself. Sophia was already moving. The darkness was absolute for exactly 2 seconds. Then the mercenaries' infrared systems activated, thermal scopes and night vision painting the world in shades of green and gray. But 2 seconds was an eternity for someone trained to fight in the gap between light and dark, in the liminal space where human eyes failed and technology lagged. Sophia had already dropped below Yuri's sight line. She moved with the silent efficiency of someone who had spent months in a Siberian facility learning to become absence itself. Her hand found his knee, the lateral collateral ligament, specifically, and struck with surgical precision. Not hard enough to make noise. Just hard enough to destabilize. Yuri's leg buckled. His rifle swung wild, searching for a target that was no longer where his muscle memory expected. Sophia rose inside his guard, one hand catching his weapon arm, the other already moving with the preloaded syringe from her supply case. The needle found the groove between his neck and shoulder, the brachial plexus, a highway of nerves that controlled arm function, and delivered 20 milliliters of propofol directly into the nerve cluster. Yuri tried to cry out. The sound died in his throat as the sedative hit his system like a freight train. His rifle clattered against the concrete floor. His body followed 3 seconds later, unconscious before his head struck the ground. Sophia caught the rifle, cleared it with practiced hands, and set it silently aside. One down. She retrieved Yuri's radio and earpiece, listening to the chatter in Russian. "Yuri, report." Volkov's voice, annoyed. "What happened to the generator?" "Static." Sophia didn't respond. "Let them wonder. Let them worry." She moved into the corridor, her eyes adjusting to the darkness faster than they should have. A side effect of training that involved prolonged sensory deprivation and chemical enhancement of scotopic vision. The hospital's layout was embedded in her memory from 2 years of night shifts. Every exit, every supply closet, every ventilation shaft. Footsteps approached from the stairwell, heavy, cautious, night vision goggles making their characteristic soft whir. Another operator, sent to investigate the generator failure. Sophia pressed herself into the alcove where the industrial cleaning supplies were stored, becoming shadow and negative space. The operator passed within inches, his attention focused forward, his rifle raised. She stepped out behind him with the silence of a thought. Her arm looped around his throat, not a choke, but a carotid restraint that cut blood flow to the brain without restricting airway. He tried to turn, to bring his weapon to bear, but she was already inside his reaction curve. Her other hand found the pressure point behind his ear, the mastoid process, and applied precise force. The combined effect dropped his blood pressure catastrophically. His body went limp in 7 seconds, unconscious from cerebral hypoperfusion. Sophia lowered him to the floor with care, retrieved his radio and weapon, and disappeared back into the darkness. Upstairs, Volkov's voice crackled over the radio, sharp with the first edge of concern. "Dmitri? Yuri? Someone talk to me." Sophia pressed the transmit button once. Let them hear only silence and the soft whisper of their own mortality. Then she began to hunt. Keller had made his mistake when the lights died. In the chaos of absolute darkness and shouted Russian commands, he had done what prey animals do, he had bolted. Not far. Just to the supply closet adjacent to Bay 3, where he'd wedged himself between shelving units of sterile linens and replacement 4 bags, his expensive suit now damp with sweat and terror. Through the narrow gap where the door hadn't quite closed, he watched the ICU transform into something from a nightmare. Volkov's remaining men had activated glow sticks, chemical green light that turned their faces into skull-like masks. They moved with increasing agitation, their weapons tracking shadows, their radio chatter growing sharp with concern. Yuri is not responding. One of them, his accent thick. Neither is Dmitri. Then go find them. Volkov's voice carried the dangerous calm of a man whose patience was approaching its limit. And find the generator technician. Someone sabotaged the backup. It was the blonde nurse, another operator said. She went down with Yuri. Then she's still down there, cowering in the dark. Check the voice cut off mid-sentence. Not with a gunshot. Not with a scream. Just stopped, as if someone had pressed a mute button on reality itself. Keller pressed his eye closer to the gap in the door. In the chemical green glow, he saw one of Volkov's men crumple near the nurse's station, his body folding with the boneless grace of a puppet whose strings had been cut. No sound. No struggle. Just the soft whisper of fabric against linoleum. And behind where the man had stood, barely visible in the darkness beyond the glow stick's reach, a shadow moved with purpose. Blonde hair caught the faint light for just a moment. Sophia. Keller's breath caught in his throat. The woman he'd criticized for lacking personality, for being too cold, too efficient, she moved through the darkened ICU like something that had never been entirely human. Her steps made no sound. Her silhouette flowed from shadow to shadow with the fluid certainty of water finding downhill paths. Another operator turned, bringing his rifle up, night vision goggles scanning for threats. Sophia was already behind him. Her hand moved in the darkness. Keller couldn't see exactly what she did, but the operator's knees buckled. She caught him as he fell, lowering him silently to the floor, and was gone before the green glow stick could illuminate where she'd been. Contact. One of the remaining mercenaries fired blindly into the darkness, his suppressed rifle coughing 3 times. Bullets sparked off medical equipment. Hold fire, you idiot. Volkov's roar carried genuine anger now. You'll hit the hostages. But Sophia wasn't near the hostages. She was everywhere and nowhere, a phantom that existed in the spaces between their perception and their reaction time. Keller watched her pass within feet of his hiding place, her face visible for just a heartbeat in the reflected glow. No fear. No rage. Just cold, empty calculation, the face of someone doing a job they'd done 1,000 times before. And in that moment, pressed into his hiding place among the sterile linens, Adrian Keller understood with perfect clarity that the woman he dismissed as a glorified technician was the only thing standing between the ICU staff and a massacre. He began, very quietly, to pray. The hospital's ventilation system was a network of steel arteries that connected every room, every floor, every forgotten corner of the building. Sophia had spent her first month mapping it during slow night shifts, noting every access point, every weakness in the aging infrastructure. Now that knowledge became a weapon. She entered through the maintenance access panel in the second-floor utility room, her body sliding into the ductwork with the practiced ease of someone who had infiltrated buildings far more secure than this. The metal was cold against her palms, the air inside stale and thick with decades of accumulated dust. She moved in silence, distributing her weight across the structural supports, avoiding the thin panels that would boom like drums under pressure. Through the ventilation grates below, she could hear Volkov's team growing increasingly desperate. She's in the walls. One of them, his voice tight. I can hear movement. Then flush her out. Volkov, still controlled but with an edge now. Use the. Sophia was already past them, crawling through the ductwork with the efficiency of someone who had trained in spaces far more confined than this. The FSB facilities outside Moscow had included sensory deprivation exercises in coffin-sized boxes, hours spent in darkness learning to control breath and heartbeat and the primal scream of claustrophobia. This was spacious by comparison. She reached the junction above Bay 5 and paused, listening. Below, she could hear Dr. Moreau's labored breathing, the soft crying of the nurses still kneeling where Volkov had left them. 2 operators remained in the main ICU space, their positions marked by the green glow of their chemical lights. Sophia opened her supply case in the darkness of the duct, her fingers finding the contents by touch alone. The small canister felt familiar. CS gas, military grade, liberated from a Spetsnaz training facility she'd visited in another life. She'd kept it for 2 years, hidden in the false bottom of her case, hoping she'd never need it. Hope was a luxury she could no longer afford. She unscrewed the ventilation grate with slow precision, the metal threads releasing without sound. Below, one of the operators was speaking into his radio, updating Volkov on their deteriorating situation. No contact with Dmitri, Yuri, or Pavel. Whatever she is, she's picking us off. Sophia dropped the canister through the open grate. It hit the floor with a soft metallic click. The operator's head snapped toward the sound. By then, the canister was already hissing, releasing its payload into the ICU's enclosed space. CS gas bloomed like an invisible flower of agony. The operator's night vision goggles became liabilities, amplifying the effects, turning their eyes into pools of chemical fire. They staggered, coughing, temporarily blinded, their weapons forgotten as their bodies prioritized the overwhelming need to escape the pain. Sophia was already moving, crawling to the next access point, letting the ventilation system carry her to where Volkov waited. She could hear him over the radio, his voice finally showing cracks in its controlled facade. Fall back to the stairwell. Regroup at. But there would be no regrouping. No fallback position. No extraction. Sophia had turned the hospital into a cage, and Volkov was only beginning to understand he'd locked himself inside with something far more dangerous than he'd anticipated. The ghost in the walls moved on, silent and inevitable as death itself. Volkov adapted faster than Sophia had anticipated. Through the ventilation grate above Bay 3, she watched him drag Dr. Moreau to the center of the ICU, one massive hand fisted in the doctor's collar, the other pressing a pistol against his temple. The remaining operators, only 2 now, had taken defensive positions, their backs to each other, weapons sweeping the darkness in overlapping arcs. Sophia. Volkov's voice carried through the chemical haze with eerie calm. I know you can hear me. I know you're close. You move like Spetsnaz, but your technique is FSB. Alpha Group, perhaps? Or something more, specialized? Moreau's breath came in short gasps. His eyes were wide with terror and confusion, trying to reconcile the man who held him with the words being spoken. Trying to understand how his efficient, forgettable night nurse had become the subject of a Russian mercenary's professional assessment. I will make you an offer, Volkov continued. Show yourself now, and I will let the staff live. Continue this game, and I will execute them one by one until you run out of people to save. He pressed the gun harder against Moreau's skull. Starting with this one. You have 10 seconds. Sophia remained motionless in the ductwork, her breathing controlled, her mind calculating probabilities with cold precision. Moreau would die if she didn't act. The others would follow. Volkov wasn't bluffing, men like him didn't bluff because they didn't need to. But revealing herself meant the end of everything she'd built. 2 years of careful construction, of becoming someone unremarkable, someone safe. The quiet life she'd sought as penance for the blood on her hands. 10. Volkov began counting. 9. 8. Moreau made a sound, not quite a sob, not quite a prayer. 7. 6. Sophia's fingers found the grate fasteners. Below, the 2 remaining operators maintained their defensive positions, eyes scanning for threats. Disciplined. Professional. They would engage the moment she appeared. 5. 4. She thought of Moreau's casual dismissals, his assumption that she was merely a tool for his use. She thought of Keller's criticism, his demand for personality and warmth. Neither man had ever seen her as fully human. 3. 2. But that didn't mean they deserved to die for their blindness. Sophia kicked the ventilation grate free. It fell with a metallic clang that drew every eye upward. She dropped through the opening in the same motion, her body falling 8 feet to land in a crouch between the two operators. Their weapons swung toward her. She was already inside their reaction curve, moving with the brutal efficiency of someone who had spent years learning that hesitation was just another word for death. Her elbow found the first operator's throat, the hyoid bone, specifically, with enough force to collapse his airway. He dropped, choking, his rifle clattering away. She flowed into the second operator's space, her hand catching his weapon and redirecting it as he fired. The suppressed shots went wide, sparking off equipment. A nerve strike to his brachial plexus, and his arm went dead. A palm strike to his solar plexus, and he folded. 2 seconds. Both down. Sophia straightened, facing Volkov across 10 feet of blood-spattered linoleum. His gun remained pressed to Moreau's head, but his eyes, pale, calculating, were locked on her with something approaching respect. "There you are," he said softly. "Finally. The ghost shows her face." Volkov's grip on Moreau tightened, the pistol unwavering. "Hands where I can see them." Slowly. Sophia complied, raising her empty palms with the careful precision of someone who understood that cooperation was just another tactical option. Around them, the ICU had become a battlefield marked by unconscious operators and the chemical sting of CS gas slowly dissipating through the ventilation system. "You have impressive skills," Volkov observed, his tone conversational despite the gun at Moreau's head. "FSB training, yes? But you hide here, playing nurse. Running from something? Or someone? Does it matter?" Sophia's voice remained flat, empty of inflection. "To me? No." Volkov's smile was audible. "But I am curious what makes a woman with your talents content to empty bedpans and change 4 bags." Behind Volkov, through the darkness, Sophia could see movement. The 2 operators she dropped with nerve strikes were beginning to stir, the effects temporary, just enough to buy seconds. And seconds were all she needed. "Penance," Sophia said, taking a half-step forward. "Stop." The gun pressed harder against Moreau's temple. "I may respect your skills, but I will still kill him." "I know." Another half-step. She was now within 6 feet of the defibrillator cart positioned between Bay 4 and Bay 5. "But you're also calculating. You came for the witness. He's already dead. Staying here gains you nothing. It gains me leverage." Volkov's eyes tracked her minute movements. "You surrender, cooperate, and perhaps we all walk away. You continue this." Sophia lunged. Not toward Volkov, toward the defibrillator cart. Her hand slapped the power switch, charging the paddles with a rising whine that filled the darkened ICU. Volkov's gun swung toward her, but Moreau, finally understanding that paralysis meant death, threw himself sideways with desperate strength. The shot went wide. Sophia grabbed the defibrillator paddles, their charge at maximum, 360 joules of electrical potential. Behind Volkov, one of the stirring operators was reaching for his rifle, his vision clearing, his motor function returning. She threw the first paddle like a discus. It struck the operator in the chest, still connected to the defibrillator by its coiled cable. His body convulsed as the electrical charge discharged through him, every muscle contracting simultaneously. He collapsed, seizing. Volkov fired twice. Sophia was already moving, using the defibrillator cart as a shield. The bullet sparked off medical equipment. She grabbed the medical gas canister from the nearby crash cart, pure oxygen, pressurized, explosive in the right conditions. The second operator had his rifle up, tracking her movement. Sophia twisted the valve on the oxygen canister and hurled it toward him. It tumbled through the air, venting gas, turning the space between them into an invisible cloud of hyperoxygenated atmosphere. She grabbed the second defibrillator paddle and triggered it. The electrical discharge ignited the oxygen cloud with a concussive whomp that lit the ICU in brilliant white light. The operator disappeared into the flash, his clothing catching fire, his screams brief before unconsciousness claimed him. Volkov's gun tracked through the chaos, searching for Sophia through the aftermath of the explosion. But she had already dropped below his sight line, rolling behind the nurse's station, her mind calculating the final equation. One operator down from electrical shock. One down from flash fire. Both alive but incapacitated. Only Volkov remained. And unlike his men, he would not go down easy. Volkov vaulted over the nurse's station with surprising agility for a man his size. Sophia was already moving, abandoning the position before he landed. She heard his boots impact the tile, heard the whisper of his rifle swinging to track her. But fighting in confined spaces against a larger opponent with superior reach and firepower required eliminating advantages, not confronting them directly. She stayed low, circling through the maze of medical equipment and overturned 4 stands. Volkov followed with methodical patience, his rifle sweeping in controlled arcs. He wasn't rushing. Wasn't letting anger drive his tactics. Professional. Disciplined. Dangerous. You fight well, Volkov called out, his voice echoing through the darkened ICU. But you fight alone. I have reinforcements coming. Backup teams. Eventually, you will run out of tricks. He was lying. Sophia knew it from the tightness in his voice, the slight elevation in pitch that betrayed stress. His team was gone. His mission had failed. He was trapped in hostile territory with a ghost who had systematically dismantled his operation. She circled back toward Bay 7, where the darkness was deepest, where the emergency lighting had been damaged in the oxygen flash. Volkov followed, finally abandoning patience for speed. He came around the corner fast, rifle raised. Sophia was waiting inside his reach. Her hand caught the barrel, redirecting it upward as he fired. The suppressed shots punched into the ceiling tiles. She flowed into his center mass, too close for the rifle to track, and drove her knee into the nerve cluster behind his thigh, the sciatic nerve, a bundle of pain receptors that controlled leg function. Volkov grunted, his leg buckling slightly. But he didn't go down. Instead, he released the rifle and grabbed for her, his hands seeking a grapple that would let him use his superior mass. Sophia didn't let him establish grip. She struck with economical precision. Palm heel to his floating rib, elbow to his solar plexus, fingers finding the pressure point below his jaw. Each strike targeted nerve clusters, structural weaknesses, points where technique mattered more than strength. Volkov blocked, adapted, countered with brutal strikes of his own. His fist grazed her temple, setting off stars in her vision. His other hand caught her shoulder, beginning to pull her into a crushing hold. She went with the momentum, using his strength against him. Her leg hooked behind his damaged knee, her body weight leveraging him off balance. They went down together, a controlled fall that put Sophia on top. Her forearm found his throat. Not a choke, but a blood flow restriction targeting the carotid arteries. Volkov tried to buck her off, his hands clawing for her face, her eyes. She maintained position with the grim determination of someone who understood that close-quarters combat was won by whoever could endure discomfort longer. His strikes weakened. His breathing changed. The fight drained from his limbs as oxygen deprivation shut down higher brain functions. 15 seconds later, Volkov went limp. Sophia maintained the hold for another 10 seconds, ensuring unconsciousness was complete. Then she released him, standing over his body with the same empty expression she'd worn throughout the night. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just the cold acknowledgement of a job completed. In the darkness around her, the ICU staff began to emerge from their hiding places. Keller from his closet. Moreau from where he'd taken cover. The other nurses, shaking and crying and staring at Sophia with the horrified recognition that they had never known her at all. Sophia Novak, the efficient shadow, the forgettable night nurse, stood among the wreckage of her carefully constructed life and felt nothing. The mask had fallen. The ghost was exposed. And there was no going back. The police arrived with the sunrise. Sophia sat in the administrator's office, her scrubs blood-stained, her blonde hair disheveled for the first time in 2 years. Around her, the hospital had transformed into a crime scene, yellow tape cordoning off the ICU, forensic teams photographing unconscious mercenaries, paramedics treating the shell-shocked staff. Detective Morrison sat across from her, his recorder running, his eyes sharp with the kind of professional curiosity that recognized when someone's story didn't quite align with their supposed identity. "Walk me through it again," he said. "You're a night nurse, no military background according to your employment records, yet you neutralized 7 armed assailants using, what exactly?" "Medical knowledge," Sophia replied, her voice as empty as it had always been. "Anatomy. Pressure points." They were overconfident. "I was lucky." Lucky. Morrison's skepticism was palpable. He glanced at his notes. "You sabotaged a backup generator, deployed CS gas through a ventilation system, created an oxygen flash explosion, and subdued a man with confirmed Spetsnaz training using what witnesses describe as professional combat techniques. That's a lot of luck, Ms. Novak." "Yes. Your records show you arrived in the US 2 years ago. Before that, medical training in, where was it? Prague." The lie was well constructed, backed by documents that would hold up to standard scrutiny but would crumble under anything deeper. "I worked in emergency medicine." Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then he closed his notebook. "You saved lives tonight. Whatever else you are, whatever you're not telling me, that matters. The staff is calling you a hero." "I'm not a hero," Sophia said quietly. "I'm just someone who was in the right place. Or the wrong place, depending on perspective." She gave her statement with mechanical precision, answering questions with the minimum information necessary. Morrison clearly wanted to press harder, but the reality of the situation constrained him. 7 hostiles neutralized, 0 civilian casualties, a high-profile witness's life preserved. Whatever his suspicions about Sophia's background, they were overshadowed by the positive outcome. When he finally released her, dawn was painting the windows gold. Sophia returned to the locker room where her street clothes waited. Keller intercepted her in the hallway, his split lip bandaged, his eyes holding something that might have been shame. "Sophia, he stopped, words failing. "Thank you. I'm sorry that I didn't." "It's fine," she said, brushing past him. "The hospital wants to recognize you. A ceremony, media attention, possibly a commendation from." "No." She kept walking. In the locker room, she changed quickly, methodically packing her few personal belongings into a duffel bag. 2 years of careful construction, reduced to what could fit in a single bag. Dr. Moreau found her as she was closing her locker for the last time. "You're leaving," he said. "Not a question." "Yes." "Because of what happened?" "Sophia, you saved our lives." "You don't have to." "I was never Sophia Novak," she interrupted, her voice finally showing a crack of something beneath the emptiness. "That person was just a role. A cover. A fantasy that I could be something other than what I was trained to be." "And what were you trained to be?" She looked at him with eyes that had seen things he couldn't imagine, done things that would haunt his nightmares. A ghost. She walked past him, through the hospital corridors where she had spent 2 years trying to heal instead of harm, trying to save instead of kill. The staff she passed stared with a mixture of gratitude and fear, seeing her clearly for the first time. Outside, the morning air was cold and clean. Sophia climbed into her car, already packed with emergency supplies, false documents, cash in 3 currencies, and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, the hospital receded. With it, the brief illusion that Sophia Novak could ever be more than a temporary identity worn by someone who would always be running. She merged into traffic and disappeared, just another car among thousands, just another ghost fading into the static of an indifferent city. The efficient shadow had one final task. To vanish completely, leaving behind only questions and the fading memory of a nurse who had never really existed at all.